The sun sat on the ridge of pine trees, and the horses were galloping along the road when Michael felt the pocket watch finally chime. "We're not going to make it!" Derek screamed in panic. "Sir," Michael leaned into the window, "is there a faster way to Harper's Ferry?" "Yes, cross country," the soldier shouted back. "May not be safe. Enemy troops." Michael didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." The driver handed back muskets to the boys. "You know how to fire these?" Derek started to answer no, but Michael nudged him, and they both signaled yes. "Be on the ready." For the next while there was no trouble. Then, just as they rounded a bend in the road on a cliff above the Potomac River, they heard war whoops coming from the woods on their right flank. "All right, Derek, raise your musket. Get ready to fire," Michael shouted. "But Michael, I can't. I don't know how," Derek whined. Then the coach lurched over and skidded onto its side. The horses broke loose and ran. The boys were dazed for a time, but when they looked up on the side of a valley just across the Potomac, they could see little houses nestled. "Harper's Ferry! We have to run for it! Let's go!" The boys ran and ran until they could taste blood in the backs of their throats. Finally, they bolted across the rail bridge that leads into Harper's Ferry. Union troops were guarding it, but when they saw the uniforms the boys were wearing, they let them pass. Finally, they ran up the last hill to the door of the museum, but Michael looked at his watch. He sat down in a heap. "It's been more than an hour. We didn't make it, Derek." Michael pulled at the door. Game or not, it was locked. It wouldn't open. Both boys sat on the doorstep, rocking and crying. "We're never going to see Grandma again," Derek sobbed. "We're stuck in 1862. Should we have warned Mr. Lincoln about the theater?" "No, Derek. Giving him hope was fine, but if we had told him that, it could have changed history." At exactly that moment the door unlatched and squeaked open, spilling the bright lights of the museum onto the alley where they were sitting. They turned. "You broke the rules," you heard a stern voice say, Mr. Portafoy. "But some rules are meant to be broken." At the hotel, the boys ran all the way to their grandmother's room and leapt into her arms. "You boys act like you haven't seen me in ages. You only been gone for an hour." Michael breathed a deep sigh. It had been a game after all. Mr. Lincoln, the battlefield, the escape, all of it. "But Grandma," Derek insisted, "we were really there, at Antietam. We saw dead soldiers, battlefields. We saw President Lincoln." "Oh, boys, what you took part in was a reenactment. Entire groups all around the country put on uniforms and act out important battles of the war," their grandmother reassured them. "No, Grandma, we were there," Derek said. Their grandmother thought for a time. "Well, boys, if whatever you experienced made history come to life for you, then that's all that counts," she crowed. That afternoon, after tea in the museum, the two boys went over to the Civil War photos. There it was, the one by Alexander Gardner, President Lincoln and General McClellan, standing in front of the tent. Michael paused, because there, in the background, almost in the shadows, were two boys. "Grandma, come look!" the boys gasped. Their grandmother came over to the photo. She adjusted her glasses. Her eyes widened. She reeled back, for there on that wall in the Civil War photo, very clearly, were Michael and Derek. My dear readers, at the battle at Antietam, September 17, 1862, the Union and Confederate armies together suffered the greatest losses for one day of any Civil War battle, 23,000 dead and wounded. It was a battle General Robert E. Lee could have won, but he didn't, all because of a paper wrapped around 3 cigars. Just weeks before Antietam, Lee had stood up to the Union Army at the Second Battle of Bull Run. Now his goal was to move west and encounter the Union Army in the North itself, Maryland. The South was running short of supplies. Fall was coming on. If Lee could defeat the Union soldiers in the North, he could raid northern farms and get much-needed food supplies. Indeed, such a victory would mean a real turning point to the whole war. But a Union soldier discovered the cigars, opening up the paper covering them to discover that it showed where Lee planned to station his troops at Antietam. The soldier rushed the information to General George McClellan, and this crucial information gave McClellan and the Union Army extraordinary advantage. The actual one-day battle occurred near the village of Sharpsburg at Antietam Creek. A sunken road where the Confederates got trapped became Bloody Lane. A major battleground, one that I have pictured, was a simple cornfield, which in the days that followed became forever after the cornfield. My story telescopes time. No one really won the battle at Antietam conclusively. General Lee sent his entire army of Northern Virginia into action, 38,000 soldiers, and even though General McClellan had the cigar paper information about Lee's plan, McClellan cautiously only sent two-thirds of his army into battle, 60,000. It was not enough for a total victory. McClellan would lose his position as commander-in-chief for this decision, but not for another 3 months. The actual day that Lincoln visited McClellan in the battlefield was October 3rd, nearly 2 weeks after the battle. The two armies would have gathered their wounded and their dead long before that. Perhaps the story then was indeed a reenactment where time can be telescoped, as the grandmother of Derek and Michael said, or perhaps it was a game like no other, where the magnitude of the moment transcended time itself. What is true is that the Union won the battle strategically, and this win enabled the President shortly after the battle to issue a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation freeing the slaves, and a formal proclamation January 1st, 1863, changing the course of history. Respectfully, Patricia Polacco.